We began our safari at the payphone sign for Cuatros Minutos 50 Centavos a Todo Mexico, right there at the crossroads of North Morley Avenue and East International Street, with fence and wire commencing at warning, no trespassing, restricted area, keep out, authorized personnel only, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, danger, and there rose the wall with coils of razor wire on top, and before it, a low fence to no man's land. The wall itself bore 6 rolls of razor wire, one on top of the other, with Mexican nogales, a hill studded with white little houses, on the right-hand side of it. American nogales already ending on the left, that razory wall marching up the steep hill and over the horizon, shaggily silver-white against that dark wall, a hideous horror that continued east. Silhouetted razor circles dominated the drizzly sky. After a few bends and dips, it lapsed into something more picayune, merely those high, dark, vertical slats, topped with metal plates and spiced rather than saturated with razory wriggles. The Mexican colonias kept on, but our side, the American side, had become beautifully wild desert. Every time we saw a Border Patrol vehicle, the brash fixer would run over to talk to its occupant. Quote, "That guy, he knows everything," the fixer enthused. Quote, "He is sitting here watching for people to cross. As soon as he looks away, a spotter will send them across." Right now, they just take that wire, they cut it, and come on through. He said we can take a dirt road for 8 miles, and the Army's still putting up razor wire. It's all for show. On the other side, it's not too dangerous, but people do come through. He just said, "It's ridiculous. Just a game. This is Morley Gate." Close quote. Our newly adorned Great Wall of China kept snaking up and down the red dirt hills with white Border Patrol trucks at intervals. The eye followed the dark rusted wall with its silvery razor wire loops. 2 rows almost touching just below the top dark rectangles, and a third not far above the halfway mark. Before we knew it, we were at location E8. The letter designations are used as landmarks, CBP explained. The great silvery night buster lamps shut off just for now. Of course, the drizzle increasing, the low sprawl of Nogales, Mexico, whitish and grayish and red-roofed behind the slats, while behind me ran that lovely rolling desert. It was almost pretty how the wall frozenly swayed with the land, the lovely sinuousness of it, the narrow vertical rectangles of dark gray sky between the slats, achieving, if not hospitality, at least a sort of geometric excellence. Here he has a photo of a wall in a rural area there. So if it's not a hospitable entrance, at least it's geometrically pleasing in points, I suppose, is the gag. The fixer leaped out to make friends with the next border patrolman, whom I'll falsely call Sid. Quote, "One thing he said was once they catch them, they have 2 options, give up or cross illegally again and take your chances. If they've only crossed once or twice, they send them back, and they probably come back the next day. If you're legal, once you get your court asylum date, they drop you off at the bus station." Close quote. I remembered what Scott at Diane's shelter had said, quote, "Back around the first of this year, we had capacity in our shelters, but ICE wasn't bringing them. They were dropping them again at the bus station." Close quote. The fixer went on about Sid, quote, "What he said was that 95% of the people can't make their court date." Close quote. Then up another road, we rolled to E14. By the way, that was 95% of the people can't make their court date. Then up another road, we rolled to E14, where a brown-green creek flowed out by some gates, and the wall snaked up over itself. At another stop, someone's empty water bottle stood tucked into a belly-high niche between 2 great slats of border security. And now lovely desert trees and scrubs ruled the Mexican side, with no more Nogales anywhere. Here was another immense gate, and we arrived at E16, then entered heavier rain, with a small herd of brown and palomino horses behind us. Another border patrolman, a fat, sullen one who looked Mexican-American, spied down upon us. The fixer asked him if the razor wire deterred anybody, and he couldn't rightly say. He told us we weren't allowed to be here because this was private land. The fixer said that the very first border patrolman, even before Sid, had told us to roll on ahead, and that shut him up. E20 was another small gate. Then we were looking down a steep gully into E21. At E25, we chatted with a border patrolman through our respective windows, and the fixer asked, "Does the razor wire slow them down?" Quote, "That's exactly what it does. It slows them down." "Does it stop them?" Quote, "Nothing's going to stop them," replied the young officer, who had just received his degree in unmanned aeronautic systems, which I cleverly guessed to mean drones. Would it have been neighborly and kind to assure him that on the other side of the border people were more impressed by his razor wire? Old Jorge, for instance, who hit me up for help because he was hungry, and after I bought him tacos, hit me up again, estimated that he had been here by the wall for 20-odd years. Quote, "Sometimes you don't see that many tourists around the first block of the city," he told me. Quote, "4 days are good, and then 3 are bad. You don't see pollos around here that much because there's a lot of police around this area. Outside the city, that's where they have that kind of movement," close quote. "What's your opinion of the wall here?" Quote, "Many years ago, it used to be all kinds of people getting across the border. Now, with this wall, you barely see them. To me, it's better," close quote. He said, maybe guessing that this was what I wished to hear. Quote, "There are many accidents, many things happen. Long time ago, when people got across, you see many people injured," close quote. "What do you think when the people from Honduras and El Salvador come here?" Quote, "We just got to give them a hand because they need it. They come from far away," close quote. That was all Jorge. Three steps on, a man named Simon stood with his hands folded across his crotch, trying to lure me into his pharmacy. He looked great in his dark glasses. Quote, "It's very tranquil," he said, "but sometimes I see a bit of fear. They just put up the razor wire, so now it's more risky. Now I'm thinking it's going to be more difficult to cross over from there. A normal day is like today," quote, close quote. "What do you think about the people from Central America coming here to cross?" Quote, "They're coming for food, and a lot of them are cold, but they are causing problems sometimes for the people who live here. They're going to stay for the housing and the jobs," quote, he thought. Then he said, quote, they're looking for a better life, and we have to support that," close quote. In short, even though Simon and Jorge might disagree with the Border Patrol, not to mention the trumpeters, as to whether the migrants should be supported, at least they believed that the razor wire was effective. It is always lovely when the minds of two nations can meet up on something. Thus uplifted, the fixer and I said goodbye to the young officer who had studied drones. From here, one could see Mount Washington, which marked the next sector. The border patrolman said that it was merely 2 more dips down to the Santa Cruz River, where the wall gave way to Normandy fence, as one called arrangements of those caltrop-like entities, similar in shape if much inferior in size to the Nazi defenses off the coast of Normandy, which showed up here and there on the Mexican side to discourage vehicles. I sat looking through the white speckled windshield at the river streaming through the combe tines across the frontage road, and then down past canted strata in the sedimentary rock of a dark red-brown color. The creek wound down through gravel and grass toward a white bird that I thought too small to be an egret, maybe a heron. On the way back, we saw real cowboys. On Monday afternoon, I thought to try the eastern way again from the Mexican side. The fixer and I, in company with our just-arrived interpreter, were returning from some interviews at Father Sean's Migrant Center, which, as it turned out, lay only 1 long block south of the Mariposa point of entry. I had asked this fine priest, whom even the atheistic interpreter was willing to consider nearly saintly, whether he had experienced mafia difficulties. And he replied, much as had the face-covering policeman, quote, "I mean, there's a cartel here, but I've never had that. During the day, it shouldn't be a problem," close quote. But the taxi driver who brought us back allowed that, quote, "from here to the railroad tracks," close quote. There were several gangs, and on the other side of the tracks, only one. He knew those characters pretty well. They were his passengers. They pulled their shirts up and showed him that they were wearing pistols. Thus, informed, we all had lunch. And then it came time to snag another taxi driver who agreed so long as his conditions would be respected. Usually, my fixer sat in the front because he liked to make movies. This time, I sat up there with my laptop open as usual, while the fixer and interpreter sat discreetly in the back. Following the sign for USA Retorno, we then made a U-turn at the train tracks, which is to say, according to the previous cab driver, the mafia border. Passing a long string of graffitied grainers, a boxcar, and some stacked cars, we ascended an overpass toward the USA, then zoomed down, accompanied by a bright yellow railing, toward Garita Peatonal número dos. As we began to climb a winding street, the driver's conditions came into force. The laptop was unproblematic, but neither my camera nor the fixer's cinematic apparatus was allowed. As at Mariposa, I could see no hint of danger anywhere. Truth to tell, I would not have taken the driver's say-so had not so many other drivers previously darkened the picture. I saw small concrete houses and walls of stone and brick, a barber shop, and we continued up the narrow street. There was hardly any traffic. We turned left onto Lagunas de Tamiahua. Then suddenly came the wall. From here on out, the driver permitted me to take 2 or 3 widely spaced photographs, but only from inside the taxi, and needless to say, he made me promise to include him out. We ground up a steep gravel road, not without strain on his car, heading toward the summit, with that reddish border wall at some distance on the left. Then came sky. Quote, "If they come, it's very dangerous," close quote, he said. And maybe one of them did come, although I failed to see him being busy with changing a roll of film. The driver grew quiet and ducked his head. The fixer said that there was a man in a truck with a German shepherd and that this man looked at him. Like most fixers, he was cheerfully, aggressively rash. He had filmed terrible things in El Salvador and went right on fixing. In our trips together, my cautiousness sometimes disappointed him, and so the only evidence I have that this man might have been mafia was that the fixer, who looked back at him, sounded convinced, maybe even cowed, and described him as a thug. I asked for a description, and he said the man was wearing a dark blue shirt. Was I supposed to piss my pants over that? The driver very evenly remarked, quote, "Well, sometimes they take your license plate number and then they come find you, but this time they didn't seem to take anything down," close quote. On the summit came a brief stretch of pavement, then the road returned to rocks and dirt, with the wall on our left side and nothing but nature on the American side. This place was called Colonia Buenos Aires. Now the driver enacted another condition. We began winding left and right on paved streets, since the dirt road by the wall had now become too dangerous. For all I know, he meant only that it was too much for the vehicle's suspension. We climbed a hill toward the Parque Industrial. This, by the way, was Simon, who we talked to. And there's another image of the wall from the car window, I assume. And there's that image of the wall from a distance. Do any of these mafias have a name? Quote, "I wouldn't know what to say," close quote. We were now some distance from the border, with dry hills hummocking the wall out of sight. When we reached a huge spider-like agave, I could see it again, so I asked whether it would be safe to stop and take a photo. "No," he said, quote, "because they have checkpoints along here and you don't want them to stop you," close quote. What do the checkpoints look like? Quote, "Several cars blocking the road and armed guys. You don't always see them. They're sometimes hidden behind the bushes," close quote. Another truck went by with dogs in the back and tough-looking men in front. The driver called them mafias, but how could he or I ever know for sure? There was the tiny red ribbon of wall and a border patrol vehicle beyond it. Very likely its occupant was someone who the fixer and I had met on the previous day. Quote, "That's where the people go," the taxi driver said, referring to the migrants. But there was still wall, So Antonia and her child must have gone farther, one way or the other. The road improved and the yellow grass got greener when we began to swing south into the Lomas de Anza, or de Anza Hills. Who lives here? I asked. Quote, people who work in the factories. Are they afraid here? Quote, well, they're afraid, but they just have to tough it out. What else can you do? Close quote. Is it just as dangerous here or safer as we go away from the wall? Quote, yeah, safer, close quote. So we swung west again toward USA and Nogales Centro, riding the highway called Plutarco Elias Calles, and I never saw anything provable. When I had paid him, I asked the driver why he had taken us if it was so dangerous, and he replied, quote, well, someone had to take you, close quote. So, reader, what should you or I conclude about these mafias? Fortunately, I can now offer an utterly, awesomely apodictic source: the trumpeter swans. Next time, part 5, the rally.